Support for WUWM podcast comes from Hop Harvest and Vine and Good Harvest Market in Pewaukee, part of One Destination, combining farm-to-table dining, local craft beers, and organic groceries under one roof. More at goodharvestmarket.com.
From Apuant Productions and WUWM, this is Classic Eats. I'm Kyle Johnson Cherek. For this episode of Classic Eats, I sit down with Chef Paul Bartolotta as he shares some truly intimate and lovely stories of his time working and learning with acclaimed French chef Paul Bocuse. But first, a story. It's 1946, and you stand at a prep table at Le Maire Brasier's kitchen in Lyon, France. Your apprentice white still stiff with newness. Your hands moving over a breast chicken with the careful attention of a young man who has recently survived a war and understands, perhaps better than most, the difference between things that matter and things that do not. The other cooks know you simply as Paul. Your name is Georges Paul Bocuse. You are 20 years old, and what you are about to learn in this kitchen isn't just how to cook. It is the entire philosophy of what French cuisine demands from the person making it. Just 2 years ago, you were bleeding near the Rhine. A farm boy who went to war at 17 and came back with an American Purple Heart and the clarity that only proximity to death seems to grant. Your father cooked. His father before him cooked. The Bocuse name has been thread through the inns and kitchens along the Saône for 3 centuries, patient as the river itself. When the liberation came, there was never any question of what came next. And the kitchen you have entered belongs to a woman who frightens you in all the right ways. Eugène Brasier, Le Maire Brasier, runs 2 restaurants simultaneously, one here in Lyon and one high in the hills above the city. Both carry 3 Michelin stars, 6 in total. No chef in the world has ever achieved such a thing. She grew up an orphan, worked in a kitchen as a servant before she could cook, and transformed herself through pure technical will into the most decorated chef in France. She does not talk about this. She cooks. She will correct your knife grip without looking up from her own work. She will hand you a sauce and say nothing, waiting for you to identify what is wrong. You will learn, painfully at first and then with growing confidence, that there is a difference between food that nourishes and food that illuminates, and that closing the distance between those 2 things is the work of an entire life. Her standard is absolute. Nothing leaves the kitchen pass unless it is correct. Not nearly correct, correct. And you will carry this for 60 years. After Brasier, there will be Fernand Pointe at La Pyramide in Vannes, and the Trois Gua brothers and Alain Chapelle, your contemporaries circling the same question together. What does French cooking look like when it remembers that it is, at its core, a conversation between a cook and an ingredient? The answer the world will call Nouvelle Cuisine will not arrive all at once. It will accumulate, dish by dish, the way Brasier's standard accumulated in you, quiet, absolute, until it is simply who you are. How could you know, Paul Bocuse, standing over the prep table in 1946, that your restaurant would hold 3 Michelin stars for more than 50 consecutive years? That you would become the first truly global ambassador of French cuisine, on the cover of Time magazine, on menus across 3 continents, your name on a competition that would become the Culinary Olympics for the world? Trends would come and be declared revolutionary and be overturned. But the idea absorbed in that Lyon kitchen, that the ingredient is sovereign, that the cook owes everything to the person at the table, that would persist. You could not have known any of it. You could only know that there was a woman in a white jacket who expected everything and accepted nothing less. You gave her everything, and that is where it began. Welcome to Classic Eats. I'm Kyle Johnson Cherek. This is a show about culinary history, why we eat what we eat, the people, the places, the scenes and situations that set the course for the way we dine. Each show, we pick a thing, a person, a drink, a movement, or an object that made its mark on what we call food. My guest again is acclaimed Chef Paul Bartolotta, and he's sharing stories from his youth when he trained with acclaimed French chef Paul Bocuse. So you were very young. How old were you when you cooked for Bocuse?
So I went to work there, let's see, in 84. So how old was I? My early 20s.
Okay.
23.
And you got there by way of letter of recommendation?
I have a great story.
Well, that's
so
my
I'm
setup, because you told me.
So I'm finishing my time. My first stage in France was with Roger Verger and Moulin Mougin in the south of France, just above Cannes.
Okay.
And I was working there, and
a chef, and
and of course Bocuse, Verger, Trois Gros, all these guys were all like homies. They were buddies. They apprenticed together. They all knew each other. There was this
came up together.
So they all knew each other. And so I was finishing my stage, and I bought a couple of his books, La Cuisine du Soleil, and I went to Monsieur Bocuse, and I said, would you sign one to my mom, sign one to my brother, my sister, I bought all these books. And he looks at me and he goes, he says, he said, did you enjoy your time in France? And I said, yes. And he said, so are you going to stay here in France, or what are you doing? I said, no, I'm going to go back to Italy. And he goes, you don't like to cook in France? I said, I love to cook in France. I'm supposed to go to work with Trois Gros. My next stage is for 5 months, so I kind of don't know what to do. So I'm going to go back to Italy. And he goes, but you want to stay? And I said, sure. And so, of course, he immediately goes, stay right here. And he walks up his stairs to his little office, and he comes down. And there was this, the chef in the kitchen, his name was Philippe. And he's like, Philippe. And he comes over to the chef, and he's like, what's up? And he goes, you go to Lyon after we close today? He goes, yes. And he goes, can you take him to Monsieur Paul? And I said, I have an apprenticeship all set with Paul. And so I'm like, okay, and so I pack up my bag,
just like that,
and I'm just like that. So I get in the car, and we're pulling out of the driveway, and I said, Philippe, this Paul restaurant. He said, it's a good place. And he hits me. He's like, hey, he said, with it going, you're an idiot. And he goes, you're going to work for Paul Bocuse. And I sat back in I'm in his, his little Peugeot, and I'm like, oh my God. And he goes, yes, tonight you have dinner with my family, and tomorrow morning I take you, and you start tomorrow with Bocuse. And I was just speechless.
Sure.
Speechless. And of course, he, as we come through he drove out of his way to show me, Auberge, Paul Bocuse's restaurant. He said, here's where you'll be tomorrow. Now you have dinner at my house. And I literally couldn't sleep a wink all night. I had dinner at his family. His mom made this great dinner for us, very Lyonnaise. And then the next morning, I was walking into Paul Bocuse's kitchen with my little knife kit and, my little bag and whatever. And it was quite a beginning, and it was sort of the end of the season because we were wrapping up sometime in September, and I was September, October, November, December. Yeah, it's about 5 months, till through Christmas. And I was in Lyon when the weather changed. And one other story, I don't know if I shared the coat story.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So another one was when the weather started turning. I was in Gare Margé. Gare Margé did a lot of the butchery as well, so that was fine because I was dealing with wild hare and other things that I hadn't done so much of in Italy. So I was doing some of the lièvre à la royale, this classic wild hare, royal, rich, not for the faint of heart.
Okay, and Bocuse is a big hunter, so this would absolutely be something here.
Definitely down the road.
Yeah.
And so one afternoon we had this break room where we had our lunches, and of course I was cleaning the poulet de Brest, canard, the pigeon, all the squab and things. So I set up a table sort of like this area where I was breaking down all the chickens and getting them all prepped for the poulet en vessie and then the squab and the duck dishes that we were doing. And Bocuse walks by in the middle of the afternoon, and he's like, "Qu'est-ce tu vas quoi? What are you doing here?" And I'm like, "I'm cleaning," and he goes, "Why now?" And I said, "Well, 2 reasons. One, I already know how to clean chicken." And I just said, "This is the best chicken I've ever cleaned." But I said, "But I don't." I said, "And two, if I get this done, I'll be able to see what's going on in the kitchen in the afternoon and stay next to
This is your leitmotif in French kitchen.
Jaloux, with Roger Jaloux, the chef." And he's like, "Okay." And he said, and besides, it's freezing outside, and I'm staying at that Le Bordel, it was called. It was like a whorehouse down the road. It's like 2 miles down the road is where I was staying because they didn't have rooms.
Super cheap, kind of.
Oh, like beyond super cheap, like a couple of francs a night.
Yeah.
And he sort of smiled. "Oh, you're with Madame?" And yeah. And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Okay." And he goes, and so of course, he looks at me and he says, "Okay, well, tomorrow morning, what are you doing?" And I said, "I don't know." And he goes, "You want to go to the market with me?" And I'm like, "Oui, chef, of course." He goes, "I pick you up at Madame Sosa's, at 6:30 in the morning."
Right.
And of course, the little Paul Bocuse van shows up, and there's Monsieur Paul, and he picks me up, and I get outside. It's freezing cold, and he looks at me and he goes, "Where's your coat? Where's your menton?" And I said, "I came here from Verger," and I said, "All my winter clothes are in Italy, so I don't have a coat."
Right. I was thrown in a car, basically.
Yeah,
and driven
exactly.
Here,
Right.
Exactly.
I told him the story. So we drove back to the restaurant. We walked in the back door by the big walk-in freezer, and there's this coat that they use. And he took the coat and he looked at me and he goes, "Here's your winter coat. You cannot be without a coat." And he goes, "When you leave, just don't remember to hang it up again." And he goes, "And bring it in every day when you come in. So if anybody needs to go in the freezer, it's here. But this is for you." And I was just like, "Wow."
This is December.
This was a little bit before December. It was probably November-ish, but it was already getting cold.
Yeah.
And in the afternoon I would walk these distances, and I'd walk like a mile or something to go like nap for an hour and then walk back. So I figured, what am I going to do there? It was in the country. It wasn't like in the center of Lyon. It was in Collonges. It was kind of a rural setting.
Yeah.
So I just stayed in the restaurant. I always found something to do. I would ask the pastry chef or anything I can prep or do during the afternoon. And what did it say to Bocuse? So then, of course, Bocuse takes me to the market, and we're in the market, and he looks at these artichokes, and he goes, "En Italie, qu'est-ce que tu fais avec des artichokes?" And I'm like, "Well, what do you do with artichokes?" And I'm like, "Well, okay, carciofi." And I said, "Well, we make romana, alla Judea," and so he bought a bunch of artichokes. And so we show up in the kitchen in the morning, and
Did you teach him Italian techniques?
So I'm in the kitchen, and of course he grabs Cholet, and he said, and every day Cholet would ask Monsieur Paul what him and his wife would like to have in their little office.
Okay.
And he would write down whatever, and they would cook. And then he said, "Okay, he's making artichokes for me today." So of course every cook in the kitchen was like, "What the?" This American shows. So I'm making a carciofa, and
You're wearing the coat from the walk-in. You're making
this
lunch
poor
for
kid.
Monsieur Paul.
And so I showed him how to make carciofa. So he was very, and I give Monsieur Paul a lot of credit because he was very curious. He really wanted to see what was happening. He was not like the other people that were like, "Oh, we're too proud." He wasn't that at all. He was very curious about things that were being cooked in Italy.
How many others were you? Were you the lone American? Were there a number of other folks staging there? Like, give me a sense of what that kitchen felt like.
No, there was like one Japanese kid, and there was me. There were no other Americans in the kitchen. And even in Verger, I was the only American. There was a Japanese kid in the kitchen. And interestingly enough, there was like the associé was Thomas from Germany. Guy was on the meat station. Serge Cholet, who was married to Verger's sister, was the CDC. And Christian Morisset was the chef garde-manger, which was a really prestigious thing.
So you're the lone American in this fantastic kitchen.
Yeah.
And just try to go back to 24-year-old Paul Bartolotta in that kitchen, and like, what were the first couple of days like? I mean, the wonderful thing that I love about cooking, and I could never be a chef, but it's your aptitude is apparent within the first 15 minutes. Everybody knows how good you are in the first hour. You can't bluff. There's no bluffing, right? You have to show up and be authentic, and if you have the skills, you have the skills. And if you don't,
that is actually really true. And I think, there's a little bit of that French mentality, plus I had two things against me. One, I was coming from Italy, right? And the French love all things Italian, sort of. And
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and then of course there's, the pride, And then I was the American, right?
Right.
And I would say that of all the places to apprentice, having, apprenticed with, Verger and Bocuse, Trois Gros as well, they were connected with America already, so they were actually more welcoming. But some of the people like Maurice, he was like,
What are you doing here?
Yeah, exactly. Who are you? You're not worthy to be in this kitchen. You're American.
Yeah.
Go eat at McDonald's. It's like
Interesting,
there was this mentality. So you immediately need to sort of show up. So I was the first one in, the last one to leave.
If you're just joining us, my guest is Chef Paul Bartolotta, one of the most accomplished American chefs of our time. And he's sharing with us remembrances of someone he trained with, Chef Paul Bocuse.
In the 5 months you're there, and you're very young, if you had been in your 30s or 40s, it wouldn't have felt the same. I think there's something very precious about that 20 to 30 formative years, right?
For sure.
Can you think of anybody else that you cooked for? I'm thinking maybe Morini or someone else that influenced you as succinctly as that in that short a period of time.
I think that there were actually a lot.
Yeah?
Believe it or not. Bocuse was different because it was so unexpected. And then, so many things that you see and you watch and you experience in his kitchen. I remember sitting in his office. Have I told you the signature story?
Yeah, that was the last thing I was going to ask.
When Paul read my signature, he said, "That's your signature." I said, "Like, oui, chef." And he's like, "No. And it was a fax machine back then. He pulls a piece of paper off and he lays it down. And he writes this thing down and he says, 2 days from now, 2 years from now, 200 years from now, you will know who signed this."
Yeah.
This, like your signature was like,
Yeah.
you're like, oh,
Yeah.
I went
No,
home
his
that-
signature
I
was
went home that night.
So clearly,
Yeah.
Paul Bocuse. There's no question.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I went home that night and I had a different signature and I started working on it. And I share this, little things like little details.
What do you think his legacy is now and maybe for the next 15, 20 years?
I think he'll remain as one of the pivotal guys. I think that it'd be impossible for you not to consider Paul Bocuse's impact. He created the Bocuse d'Or, which is also considered almost like the Culinary Olympics in Lyon every 2 years.
Yes.
I think because of the Bocuse d'Or, because of the legacies that he's built, because of the tentacles of his mentorship, I think it would be very difficult for him not to remain literally one of the most pivotal chefs of the century, for sure.
Yeah, like this 100 years.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Because when you look back at the other guys, they came in sort of increments of 75 years of their career. And people, when you mentioned Fernand Poin, you knew it immediately. I mean, Poin, was not on the global stage, but yet you're a foodie, you totally get it.
Yeah.
But I think Bocuse was a global phenomenon. He was the first chef to ever like restaurants in Japan and do the Chefs de France that his son Jerome runs down in Epcot.
Yeah,
And he was the first chef with TWA to do
Right.
catering on an airplane.
Yeah. Well, that cover of I think Time magazine or whatever it was. I mean, it was the right time. So Nouvelle Cuisine was coming on, and people were traveling. Americans were traveling a lot more after World War II.
Yeah, sure.
So they're being exposed to some of these things, and there's all the kinds of stories of Alice Waters having her first fish at a 3 Michelin star and having that epiphany moment and so on and so forth. But he didn't pursue it, as I understand, but he hit with the media, and he was such an austere but colorful, live. You felt you knew the man, even though you just read an article about him. You saw a picture of him.
Yeah.
You understood who Paul Bocuse was in the way
His personality came through.
When Monsieur Bocuse died, and you went over for the funeral.
I did.
Yeah, and hundreds of thousands of chefs would have loved to have been there to honor him. It was a very small group. And you sent me this text. I know that you cooked with him, so I had sent a text saying, my condolences, essentially. And you sent me this text back, "I'm here with," and this list, and I thought, that's 20th century cooking right there.
No, Michel Guérard.
Yeah.
There was.
You were there with Keller, Michel Guérard.
Danielle, Jean-Georges, myself. There was, and then the chef, Pierre Trois Gros was there. I mean, it was really a very intimate group. And it was crazy because I did not know this, but we were having dinner in the salon upstairs as a group. And it was the day before the actual funeral, the night before the funeral. And I had committed to cook at Naples Food and Wine. I flew to Lyon for not even 24 hours. I landed, I went to the evening of, and the day of the funeral, I couldn't stay for the funeral because I had a commitment to cook, and so I went to pay my respects for Jerome and for Madame Bocuse. And
Jerome, his son, who you're very close with.
And we're having this dinner, and then Jerome said, you made the effort. I said, I made the effort for you, but I also out of respect for your father, this was a pivotal moment in me. Like, there were so many things, the signature, so many things that he taught me, life lessons or things. And this was, again, one of them. And so I said, I'm a guy that shows up.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what tonight was going to be. I didn't know that I would be at this table with these people. I didn't come because I thought I would be. I came because I know you and because it was important, and I wanted to at least show up the day before. And I showed up not knowing I would be there. And Danielle said, no, you come.
Yeah.
And then Danielle said, no, you're coming for dinner with us. And I said, okay. I just was going to show up and just say, hey.
Humbly show it respect.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then Jerome grabbed me and he said, come with me. And he took me into his dad's study, which is where Monsieur Paul was. And he wanted to be in, and he was specific. He wanted to stay in his restaurant until he was buried. And they brought him there. And I had a moment with me and Thomas, Jerome, and Danielle went down and had just a moment. It was pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
It was moving.
That's our show. Thanks for taking a few minutes while Paul Bartolotta and I talked great remembrances of Chef Paul Bocuse.
Classic Eats is created and hosted by Kyle Johnson Cherek and co-produced by Appoint Productions and WUWM.
Executive producers Kyle Johnson Cherek and Rob Schoonover. Audio editing and engineering by Brian Arkta and John Rymaszewski.
Special thanks to our guest, Chef Paul Bartolotta. Thanks for taking a seat at the table with Classic Eats. You can hear this episode again and any others you've missed when you subscribe to Classic Eats, found wherever you listen to your podcasts.